Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eva Watt. I'm the Training and Capacity Lead for NL Support, and I'm pleased to welcome you today to webinar number 5 about patient partnerships. I would like to inform you that this webinar is being recorded. A copy of the PowerPoint presentation slides will become available after the webinar. And for the ones who are joining for the first time, we have disabled cameras and microphones. You can use the chat box to answer questions or to ask questions, and you can also use the voting tool to answer questions. Our guest speaker of today is Alice Maybe. She is a patient advisor and former business analyst, and she participates in many projects on panels on various aspects of healthcare. And we are really happy that she would like to share her experiences with us today. So Alice, if you're ready, then the floor is all yours, and I hope we have a wonderful session together.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. I thought I'd start by just giving you some idea of who we all are who put this together. We're a group of patient advisors who've been partnering in research on various research projects since November of 2014. So in effect, because most of the research projects are about 3 years or 5 years in length, we're really only just past the midway in any of the projects that we engaged with earlier. So a sum total of it is that there's still a lot to learn, a lot we're learning, and I think a lot that our researcher partners and colleagues are learning as well about what this is all about. So now that I've introduced myself, I was wondering who you all were, and I understand there's a polling capability. So could you answer whether you have partnered with patients in research? And Ava had shown you the little widget that you have to press on for poll, and then just answer yes or no. So Ava, oh, there we go. We see the results. Okay, some of you have, and some of you have not. So that means we'll have a very interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to those of you who have partnered to throw in your comments when appropriate. That would be really great. So the next question, are we finished with the poll now? Because I think we can go to the next question, which is, are you a patient partner in research? I'm wondering how many of my colleagues are there who've actually partnered in research as a patient. And can you answer a poll on that as well? Oh my, it looks like we have one person. And again, I would really implore you to jump in on the chat and make your comments and ask your questions. That would be very helpful. Thank you. So now that we've introduced ourselves to each other, let's get to the meat of the matter. I'm going to be talking about two main things today. I'm going to start by setting the stage with the context, the considerations, and the concepts. And then I'm going to move to how to plan for involving citizens or patients in research. So at this time in Canada, there are about 3 key factors regarding patients and research from the perspective that we have, my team and I. What we see is that we citizens are kind of the in thing these days. We've been involved now more and more as patient and family advisors at hospitals, certainly in long-term care facilities, in residence councils and so on. And over the last 5 years, more and more we are being involved in research, and it's becoming more the norm. The second thing is that patient engagement has become a criteria for funding, not only by CIHR, but by many other funders as well. So if you want to have a grant application approved, you must have patient engagement. I believe that's called the stick as opposed to the carrot. The third thing is that partnering with patients in research is a new venture. Not only is it new for those of us who are patients and citizens, but it's very new for a lot of our colleagues. Certainly not everyone, but a lot of our colleagues. So today we're going to explore a little bit more about what it involves. I'd like to start with one key concept. As researchers, you're very used to looking at patients as subjects or participants of research. Involving us as colleagues and partners in research is quite a different thing, and it involved really thinking about us in a very different way. This is important because it will impact how you recruit us. The recruiting process for patients as partners is very different from patients as subjects. To distinguish, what I've found, and some of my colleagues as well, a lot of people flush what is a patient partner versus a patient subject. If you're approaching patient partners to get any kind of data about them for your study, then that is patient as subject. If, however, we are being involved to contribute to the focus and design of the study and the context and analysis of the finding and the KT end of things, then we are colleagues or partners. So do keep that in mind as we go forward through these slides. I'd like to talk a bit about our concerns, and I would very much like you to contribute what your concept of our concerns might be. These are some that we have identified, but there may be others, and in order to understand more about what you see, I'd really love to see some information in the chat box about this while I'm going through the current concerns. So initially, there's the tokenism thing, and that is often the case for us, and I don't believe it is because of ill will. I think mostly it's because we just don't know how to do this. And so we're invited to the table, we're on a research team, the researchers don't know what to do with us, we don't know what to do with us, and it becomes a token engagement because we're sitting there, but we don't really know how to contribute. The other thing we're afraid of, a lot of us, is not being taken seriously because we're not somebody with a bunch of letters after our name. And then, of course, there are the time and financial commitments. We're being asked to contribute 3 years or 5 years of our lives to this. And for some of us with compromised health, that may be a risk. And then, of course, there are the expenses and so on and how those are handled. We'll talk about that more later. Not understanding what's being discussed, it makes it difficult to contribute if you don't understand. And again, we'll look at some of the things that we can do to mitigate that. Discouragement. Sometimes we're very discouraged about the results of research. And that's something I'm personally really interested in, is I would love to see the conversation between the research community and the public really grow so that we understand each other and we can understand the real value of some of the fabulous research being done in this country. So next, I'd like to talk about the concerns that you might have, and again, if you can add to the chat on this, that would be very interesting. I'd love to know if this list hits the mark for you, or if there are other things that we don't have on this list. What we've heard from our partners is that they're really afraid about the length of time it takes to partner with us. Some of them are concerned about how much we can actually contribute. Occasionally, we have heard that dealing with our emotions is something that people are afraid of. This concern seems less in the research field as it is in the service delivery field when we're involved in working groups at the hospital and those sorts of things. But it can be a concern. In my experience and understanding my colleagues, I think by the time you're involved in research as a patient, this kind of goes away, but not necessarily entirely. And then the business of lack of clarity, and we're going to address how you deal with lack of clarity as we go forward. So I'd like to skip now to some considerations when we're partnering with researchers and when researchers are partnering with patients. When you're partnering with us, please acknowledge our expertise. We have expertise. We have expertise in our own bodies and the conditions that we have to live with, but we also have some expertise in navigating the system and understanding the healthcare system. In the end, we are probably more aware of the system than anybody else because we have to travel across all the silos. Factor in our limitations. So what kinds of limitations might there be to our partnering in research? There is the obvious one. If we're in a wheelchair, that needs to be accommodated. That's sort of an obvious one. But one less obvious one is the fact that many of us, and I include myself in this, have issues of fatigue. I have been asked to participate in 5-hour meetings, and I must say after 3 hours, I'm probably not alone in this, but I'm really finding it difficult to continue to sit. I deal with some chronic pain issues, and it's a challenge. I have some colleagues who are in the same boat. And who can't manage stairs very well, those kinds of things. Then there's the other practical limitations. For instance, if we are a caregiver and we have somebody at home, how do we deal with that? Can we get somebody in? Who's going to pay for it? And so on. Dealing with our limitations, it can be easily done just with a conversation to explore what those might be and how they might be mitigated. The other factor is confidentiality. In the course of our interchanges with each other during the partnership, as researchers, you will be sharing confidential research information with us, and we'll expect that we treat it confidentially. On the other hand, we may be sharing some deeply personal experiences with you and would expect the same respect for the confidentiality of our personal stories. So it goes both ways, and that builds trust and it builds respect. How to work with us. So this is an interesting topic because the other thing that I have long discussions with some researchers on is, can we partner on all types of research? Looking at the CIHR definition of types of research, we're talking about biomedical, clinical, health systems and services, and the social, cultural, environmental, population health research. I think personally the short answer is yes, and the longer answer is it differs. It differs not only depending on the type of research, but also the specific research, where it's located, what population it's targeting, and a whole host of other factors. But I do believe there is a role for us in any type of research. But I'm open to anybody challenging that because I'd like to hear otherwise. So the terms and concepts, we need to understand what is the common language in the culture of the specific research you're doing. If you're working on diabetes or health system reform, we need to understand what the terms and the concepts and the landscape looks like in order to participate fully. And it's not really just a glossary of terms. It's also maybe some background on what the landscape of the research area is all about. And finally, we need to be kept up to date. Over-communicate. Some teams I've been on have not contacted me for 6 months or more, and I wonder whether I've been sort of dropped off the team. I think you need to over-communicate somewhat with patient partners. That could be as simple as a monthly email that says, we're doing fine, we're progressing, we'll get in touch in a couple of months. That even in itself would really help a lot. Before I go on to the next slide, I've noticed in the chat box that there are some things talking about concerns, and I'd like to sort of skip to that. One of the concerns that Catherine raises is ensuring that patients are given the opportunity to contribute to the meeting without constantly singling them out and asking them to contribute. I think that's a really good issue, and it deals with sort of targeting patients as the sort of exhibit A, what is your point of view? To my mind, the more you develop the relationship before the meeting, the more comfortable we will feel about speaking up. And just making eye contact with us when asking the group generally for a point of view will invite us to become more comfortable. So I'm sorry to skip to that, but I just saw it and I found it really kind of interesting. So now we'll look at just a few more considerations. I'd like to talk about the practical considerations. Who wants to partner, and why do they, and where are they? This speaks to how you recruit us, where you find us, and what you can do to attract us to the area of research and your specific research project in and of itself. That I can't address here at this time, but it's all about the recruitment issue, which is perhaps another webinar. The other thing that needs to be factored in is that partnering with patients takes resources and it takes funds. Resources might be simply a designated person on the team to manage the partnership, and funds deals with the expenses for including patients and for orienting them, but it may also deal with the compensation factor. I'm not going to debate the compensation factor today, but be aware that CIHR has indicated that they believe that patients ought to be compensated, but they don't say how. So again, this is going to be a really interesting area to explore. I will say that I am compensated on some, but not all of my research team. And then finally, and this is a really important one, we need time to develop productive relationships. And the sooner that starts, the better. So I'd like to summarize what I think the ingredients for productive partnerships are. Time, which I've just touched on. Time to learn how to partner effectively. Time to plan the partnership. Time to plan for and recruit partners. Preparation. Preparing partners will lead to better quality participation and, as a result, better research project and better outcomes. Preparing researchers needs to happen. Preparing citizens and partners, citizen-patient partners needs to happen. Once people are prepared, then they work better as partners, and that's why there's so much more training happening right now, not unlike this webinar. And finally, planning. I feel very strongly that planning gives people a good basis to go forward to, and plans can always be adjusted when they're faced with new realities. There's two types of planning I would highlight. One is how patients and citizens can be involved as partners, and the other is how to plan for the recruitment itself. Today we're going to focus on the first, how patients and citizens can be involved as partners. So Before I start the planning piece of it, are there any questions? I'm going to wait for a moment before I do that, just to see, because I know it takes time to type. And if you don't have any questions at this moment, but they occur to you as we go along, we'll be doing questions again at the end. We have one here from Mike. Did you have or were you given clear information on expectations? Wow, excellent question, Mike. The short answer to that is, in no circumstances to date have I been given clear expectations. And that, again, I think goes back to the fact that this is new and nobody really knows what to expect. What I have done with one or two PIs is I've sat down and had early, deep conversations where we've jointly sort of hammered out what we think would be a good plan. That doesn't happen with all PIs. Not everybody is ready to do that at this time, but the ones that I have done that with have led to a much more fruitful engagement, in my opinion, and I think they would agree as well. I hope that answers your question. Okay, let's move on. We have another question here from Joan. Do funders recognize and compensate researchers for the extra time they invest in patient partners? Another very good question. In some cases, they have provided funds specifically for patient engagement, I believe after the LOI and when the application is being developed, but certainly not in every instance. I think this is an area where we need to perhaps continue to press funders to talk with us about what is needed. One of my observations and my team's observations is that the cycle between the call for applications and the deadline is traditionally way too short to handle the engagement of patients. Plus, there is most often not a consideration for the funds that should be available to support that activity. So that's a subject for a long discussion at another time, I think. But it is a good one, and I think it's one we need to, as a group, pay attention to going forward. So let's dive into what is involved with planning for partnership. To my mind, and for those of us on my SCORE team, we feel that the first thing that we need to do as a team is define the project for the public. Not define it for the funder, not define it for our colleagues in research and in academia, but for the public, because that will clarify what the importance of this project is from the public point of view. Is it sustainable? Who will benefit? What percentage of the population will be affected? Does it impact policy or practice or training? How is it sustainable? How does it impact the system to make changes to the patient experience and outcomes? So these are all questions that should be answered, in our opinion, in a public-facing description of the project. It lays the foundation, furthermore, for recruiting patients as partners. I want to touch on the different approaches to partnership that may be out there, and we'll come back to this afterwards. First of all, we can be individuals as partners or citizens on the research team. And at this point, I'd like to say I would recommend a minimum of 2 for several reasons. One is that as patients and caregivers, health reasons will sometimes mean we can't participate or can no longer continue to participate for the duration of the project. And the second reason is that when there are more than one of us, it makes us more comfortable speaking out. The other way we can be involved as on research teams is in some kind of a group. There is one research project I'm familiar with that actually has a group of 16 people from a disadvantaged background, not all with English as a first language, who have helped to design the research project. And they are marvelous. They use sometimes street language, which means I can't repeat it on the internet, but they're very clear and surprisingly knowledgeable and articulate about what should be happening and what shouldn't be happening and what they know. So a group can participate as a co-design partner for sure. I've seen it happen. In that instance, there was also an individual patient who was a partner on the team and helped manage and pull the group together. I believe that there also can be combinations of where you have individuals as colleagues on your team and you judiciously pull together focus groups to deal with specific things like developing patient-facing materials for the subjects of research. That would be a good example. So we'll talk about that more in a little minute. Now here is where we get to, in some senses, the core of how we figure out how to set the expectations for the partners that we are pulling on board. One clear way is to actually develop, if you will, a job description. Think of this as an HR or human resources exercise. What do you want these people to do? What kind of background should they have to help you out? So we're looking right now at the stages of research and what kinds of contributions can patient partners make at each stage. This will vary from project to project, from PI to PI, and from the type of partner you have, etc. But if we look at stage one, the formative setting for priorities in research, once you have a topic area, you may want to include your patient partners in a discussion about what is the actual relevant questions from their perspective in that topic area. And so that is certainly a place where we can participate. In stage two, the proposal writing and application writing, as a patient partner, I have been sometimes asked to draft the patient engagement section. That's all well and good, but I think that we can participate more even in the actual planning of the entire research project and how patient subjects are dealt with and what are the types of analysis questions there should be, etc., and what we should be doing to contribute to the KT end of things. In stage three, we probably wouldn't necessarily be involved in the actual implementation, but we can inform the implementation. This is where we can help with how you might approach the subjects of research, what materials would be helpful for the subjects of research, and so on. So that would be stage three. Stage four, we're looking at how we can contribute to the analysis and interpretation. I think that one thing that we might be able to do is to actually sit down with the researchers and say, what questions will you be asking of the data? And maybe contribute to the discussion around what questions from the patient or caregiver point of view would be appropriate to ask of the data. In stage five, the final stage, many research teams that I'm aware of are sort of see this as an obvious place to include patient partners in co-presenting the results, in perhaps co-authoring some reports or documents that come out of it, and so on. Now I'd like to talk about what what we've added in, which is the red stage at the bottom, developing and implementing a marketing communications plan. And I would encourage you to think about this. This is not KT. This is public communication. And it really should occur from, I think, the moment that you receive funding, where you start to tell your public out there, here's the research that we are engaging in, and here's why we think it's important, and stay tuned as we go through the process of research and come up with the findings. I think this is where you have social media intervention. Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? What is it? Is it a website? And I know that some teams do develop websites. So this is talking also about developing a public-friendly version of the results. We need to increase the conversation, I believe, between the public and the researchers. As a public, we need to understand what are the good things that we can help promote and see implemented, and maybe in fact see implemented faster. And as a public, we would like you to be aware of what we think is important as well. So there's a good two-way conversation that I think we need to have here. So when you go through this, you will have a job description. The other things we need to look at here are frameworks for public involvement. The IAP2 is one of the sort of standard citizen engagement frameworks out there, and this is our version of it. The IAP2 has inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. We keep some of them, and instead of empower, we're talking about partnering. But essentially, inform is just where you give information. So this would be from the marketing and communications plan. Consulting might be focus groups where you get some information that may help inform how you are going to approach the research. Collaboration may be where you collaborate with a focus group to help develop the patient-facing materials for your research. And partnering, we've already talked about. So once you have an idea of what the work is where patients can actually contribute or where citizens can contribute, then you can go back to looking at whether you need a partner or whether you need a group, where you need what, and what each type of involvement will be doing. So you can get some good clarity around what is needed. So as part of this whole thing, of course, we need to, when we're looking at planning, build a partnership timeline and budget. Some of the time factors we've already talked about. There'll need to be time to actually build the plan. This should occur during the application phase, and this is one of the reasons why I would argue those phases need to be a tad longer. You need time to recruit and onboard and orient your patient partners. They need to understand the landscape that you're operating in order to at least have a level playing field and be able to contribute. And that will take time. One way you can mitigate this is to start by developing relationships with partners before you even have a research project, so that you already know and already have the measure of several patient partners who could in future contribute to your research. And you'll need time during the project to coordinate and support the partnership. So there may be a need to talk with patients separately, patient partners and citizen partners separately, to bring them up to speed, to give them a deeper background prior to a full team meeting, for example. And when you're making arrangements for an out-of-town event, you may need more time to either make the arrangements for the patient and citizen partners or to guide them to how to do that. Budget factors. We've talked about expenses. I think the expenses for patient partners will be similar to what your other colleagues might have, with the exception that they may need to cover alternative care for a loved one at home. And they may need special transit if they are in a wheelchair, and so on. Honoraria or compensation, that's a thorny thing, but it needs to be worked out and it needs to be included in the budget factors. I have experienced being a part-time employee of a hospital so that I can be paid on a research project. I have been given what amounts to consulting fees for contributing as a partner in research. I have been given a one-shot gift card, and I have been given nothing. So it's a broad spectrum, but I would encourage you to think about that and talk amongst yourselves about what's important in that area. And I do believe that AVA at the SPORE unit would be a good resource for these types of discussions as well. So, and finally, you'll need some extra time and resources to coordinate with the partners. Planning support. The partnership will need support, not just merely the patient and citizen partners, because there are times that you will run into where your professional colleagues may not have a good experience, or they may forget to include patient partners. So this is a partnership, and both sides of the equation will need support. The support may vary from person to person and from role to role, but the support is for the partnership. Specifically for the patient and caregiver and citizen partners, we will need admin help potentially for booking out-of-town events, our participation in that, for the use of tools. Not all of us are experienced in this kind of technology we're using today, or even indeed teleconference technology. Some people I know, for the first time when they were a patient partner on research, were introduced to the use of teleconference materials and software. And then we've, three of us have run into the need to put in a CCV. And for those of you researchers who have had to deal with ResearchGate or Research.net or whatever it's called, you know how horrendous that is for yourself. Can you imagine if you're a patient-citizen partner? So some of our teams have actually stepped up and put information on our behalf, and others have guided us through. But one of my colleagues, who used to be a CEO of a global international technology company, said to me after 3 days of trying, "This is crap, and I'm not going to do it." So it could be a barrier, and we need help with that. We will need help potentially with filling in expenses. Not all of us have experience in the corporate sector where we've had to fill in expense forms. And we've talked already about access and attendance considerations. In terms of support, I think it also should be proactive. Monthly check-ins. How's it going? Here's what's happening. Updates and follow-ups. And a quick resolution of issues, which, if you're on top of things, will happen automatically, one hopes. If the updates, or if you don't hear for more than a month from a research team, it's very hard on a patient partner to feel that they are actually a partner. I would recommend at least a monthly email. If it just says, you know, "Hi, we're still alive," that would be fine. Not communicating at that level is disrespectful, confusing, and enormously discouraging for patient partners. So now I'd like to talk briefly about something that not many people think about, and that is evaluating and measuring the success of the partnership. Not the project, not necessarily the effect of the partnership on the project, but the partnership itself. So I don't know what the answers are to this, and we are still working with our partners to see what this might be, but I would really encourage you to sit down with your patient partners and say, we're developing this partnership. What do we think are the key indicators of having a successful partner? How do we know that things are going well from the researcher perspective? How do we know that things are going well from the patient-citizen partner perspective? And then once you've evaluated it, or once you have those measures, how often do you just touch base and find out? And do you do it by survey? Do you do it just as an email check-in? How do you take the temperature of the partnership itself so that you can course correct if things are going askew early enough so that you continue to get the best out of the partnership possible? Now I'd like to address the impact on the application. This is kind of the nitty-gritty piece of where you take what your partnership means to you on your research team, what you've worked out with your partners, and you incorporate it into the application with hopefully the result is a successfully funded project. In most cases, people seem to think it's sufficient to fill in the paragraph or two under patient engagement. We would argue that's not sufficient. And I have had a lot of experience in a research management committee for a funder evaluating now hundreds of research applications. And I have paid special attention to the patient engagement piece, as you can imagine. And what I found is that in those cases where people are serious about patient engagement, you see it in other places other than the 3 paragraphs you put under the patient engagement section. It is woven into the summary. It is part of the detailed description. It shows up in knowledge transfer and how the role of the patient will play out in knowledge transfer. It shows up in team roles where the team is listed and the patient-citizen partner is listed on that team with their role for the different stages. It shows up, obviously, in patient engagement. It shows up in the timelines and the tasks of the project, and it shows up in the budget. If it does not show up in most of those places, then we're talking about a token tick box situation, and the funders are getting wise to that. So I will say that patient and citizen partners can help you with that. They can review the application and keep an eye out for those sorts of things and make sure that you have the best possible application that reflects really true patient engagement. So now I'd just like to summarize the planning piece. Essentially, it boils down to figuring out what the role is at each stage in the game and coming up with a job description. Then looking at who and how should fulfill that job description, if you will. Is it panels? Where are the panels? Is it individuals? Where are the individuals? What are the individuals doing? It includes support, and we've talked at length about support and making sure there is a designated resource a person who is named in the application as the key support to the partnership. And it includes, in my opinion, measurement. And I'd be really interested to hear what you think about all of this, because I think we've come to the end of my talk. So we have some time now for questions, and I'm wondering if there's any good questions. Eva, do we have some good questions here? I see that Mike has made a comment about recommending the marketing and communications plan. Thanks for that, Mike. It is not common thought for the researchers I've talked to about this, and they're not altogether clear on how it's different with KP. Yes? Someone was speaking?
Elise, sorry to interrupt you. It's Eva here. Unfortunately, we had a little internet disruption or error here. Therefore, we missed a few slides. We have heard slide 23, but then 24 we were disconnected. So do you mind to briefly go back to that one? Because I guess that a lot of people missed this. Sorry for that.
Okay, that's 24, which is 24 is my final slide, I think. Have you seen this one, the one that I have up now?
No, we haven't seen 24.
Okay, so 24, okay, so 24 is this one, I guess. So this is my summary slide. Is this the slide you're missing? So this is really just a summary of what a partnership plan should include. Yes, so if this is a summary slide, you might want to go into questions. It's not a really big deal. That's right, and it just summarizes the material that we've covered already. So I'm going to look here in the chat to see if there are any questions. Here's a good one from Ken. How can patient partners be recruited or identified without getting into ethics problems? This is a very interesting question. When you're recruiting for subjects, you have all kinds of consent forms and the REB and all of that kind of thing. When you're recruiting partners who are patients or citizens, our feeling and our experiences, none of that need apply. We are colleagues with a certain subject matter expertise in the same way that a biostatistician might be, or any of the other folks. If your other folks on the team do not need to have an ethics approval, then neither do we. We are functioning on the team as team members. Does that answer your question? So I'd like to know if anybody has any other questions. So Ken, it looks like you're asking about the recruiting thing, advice on how to find people who are willing. In Newfoundland, you're very lucky because you have Ava and the SAPOR support unit there, who would be, I think, the first point of contact, who can also give you advice on how to recruit. And the recruiting thing is, planning for recruiting is a whole other element. I've done other webinars on just recruiting itself and would be happy to do this, or maybe there are other people who can share their experiences with recruiting with you as well. I would say, just on the top of my head, that there are many of us who started as patient and family advisors in hospital, and some of us became interested in research from that, and that may be a pool of people who are interested in giving back. A small percentage of those may be also interested in research. It becomes more difficult if it is not a specific disease-based research. Disease-based research is usually much, much easier to find a patient or citizen partner. So I hope that helps. I'm just reading something here from Mike. The implementation stage and concern about patient engagement involvement. I think that implementation would include a feedback or ongoing evaluation process. That seems like a good role for patient partners. Yes, I think so. That I hadn't even thought of that, so that's new, and thanks so much for tossing that into the mix. The idea of the patient partners being able to understand how well the implementation is going for the patient subjects, they, as peers, may be able to actually get better information or more candid information from the patients who are subjects. So that's a really interesting thought. Would anyone else like to weigh in on that? So there is still lots to learn about all of this, and I think the trick is to give ourselves grace on both sides of the partnership to make mistakes, to fumble around, and just find our way forward in this. And over time, we'll all figure it out. But I think the big key is just to be open and to try it and just move forward, and we'll make it better as we go along. I think that that's pretty much the end of it, unless you have anything more, Eva. I'm going to turn it back to you, and I want to thank you all for participating in this, and I hope it was helpful.
Thank you so much, Alice, for this wonderful presentation. There is one question more from Joanne. Do you mind having a look at that question and see if you would be able to answer this one?
I like this question. Is someone doing research specifically with regard to best practice in patient engagement? The short answer to that is yes. I'm involved actually in a number of research projects that are starting to look at what's out there, and I have been doing some lit searches together with some of my colleagues on the research side to see what's out there. And frankly, there's very little, almost nothing that we can find that definitively says we have done research and this is the best practice. So there's a lot of talk about the need to do that. There's a lot of more anecdotal stuff about what might be best practice, but there's very little rigorous research that I'm aware of to date that says X is best practice. And I'll just say on a personal basis, I'm not sure, except at a meta level, whether we will get to something that's paint by numbers, if you will, because so many research projects are vastly different from each other and really need to be founded on what the relationship is, what the purpose of the research is, and then other than saying at a meta level that you should plan, you should support, you should account for things, etc., I don't believe that we will come to a sort of a standard, this is what you do, you must have a panel or you must have this. I think there are recommendations, and that there will be a sort of a grab basket of things that worked well that you can look at over time that will help inform what you should do for your next particular research project. So I hope that helps.
Alice, I want to thank you so much for this great presentation. It was really helpful, I guess, to many of us. Regarding evaluation, I've seen that there were some questions about that. We will take that forward because we're also discussing how to evaluate our work in patient engagement. So this is something that we will discuss this year, and we will move forward with this as well. Just to let you know, there are a couple of tools out there. So if you're interested, for example, if you're in the planning phase, you might find our patient and public engagement planning template helpful. There are also some tools developed by Alice and her colleagues, which you might helpful as well. And Alice and her colleagues recently launched a a patient advisors network across Canada, so specifically for patient advisors who would like to share and meet other patient advisors across Canada. So feel free to have a look at their website, and if you're interested, you can join their advisory network as well to learn and share with others. Then last but not least, our next webinar will be about making an impact. And we will talk about outcomes that matter to patients and how to measure outcomes and how patients can help with defining outcomes that matter to them. So this will be February 16th, and please sign up for this on Eventbrite. And we're looking forward to see you then. We would like to hear from your experiences and learn from that. So I hope that this webinar was helpful, and please share any suggestions that you may have. I will share a SurveyMonkey evaluation survey with you. So I guess that was this for today. Elise, thanks again for your wonderful presentation, and thanks to you all for your great suggestions, comments, and questions today.